Minecraft PvP, one of the game's most important, loved, and controversial elements. Present in the game since early Minecraft multiplayer in 2010, it has seen many changes, improvements, nerfs, which have been liked and hated by the community. It has evolved and changed so much that it entirely divided the community, with some players even refusing to play certain versions of the game, and large servers refusing to update. PvP was once at the center of Minecraft, being the key element in many minigames and game modes, to the point where it was all players would do, and some had never even killed the Ender Dragon. But starting in late 2015 and 2016, many popular PvP servers shut down forever. The PvP community struggled in popularity, and Minecraft PvP, which at one stage almost became an esport, struggled to remain relevant. So what happened? How did we go from a thriving community to one that fell apart? How did PvP evolve from simple left clicking to advanced adrenaline-paced dueling and then into calm and calculated fighting? Well, I'm going to tell you all that and more, so let's get right into it. On August 3rd, 2010, Minecraft version Alpha 1.0.15 was released. A day later, and a server version of this update was also released, marking the first day Minecraft Survival Multiplayer became publicly available. But the first version, which allowed players to attack entities in multiplayer and to include actual damage indicators and animations, was Alpha version 1.2.3, released on November the 23rd. This version of the game was a first which allowed players to engage in PvP. But back then, PvP mechanics were incredibly different. Let me explain. Back in this early version of the game, you could hold left click with a sword and use this as an auto clicker, something which you would get banned for on modern day PvP servers. However, this auto clicker was unbearably slow. Using the power of video editing, I was able to calculate that this auto clicker clicked at about 2 clicks per second. Most PvPers these days can click upwards of 10 clicks per second, and even somebody who just left clicks as fast as possible could easily click around 7 or 8 if they tried. But that's fine, that's just the auto clicker's click speed. You can still click faster if you do it manually, right? Wrong. In this version of the game, no matter how fast you click your mouse, you will only still click at around 2 clicks per second, probably slower as it's harder to time. Now this cap on speed was eventually removed in beta versions of the game, but the auto clicker remained up until beta 1.7.3. Alright, so while the sword is a letdown in this version of the game, what about the bow? Well, the bow is insane. It's basically a machine gun, firing at an absurd rate and not requiring you to even draw the bow back. This thing is so fast that if you're not careful, it will actually lag out your game from the amount of arrows you can put out. There is absolutely no downsides of it as well. With the modern bow, when you are charging up a shot, you move far slower, but with this version of the bow, you can basically walk around like nobody's business without any penalties while raining death upon them. Alright, so now onto food. Food worked differently in these older versions of the game, as there was no food bar. Instead, food would instantly heal a certain amount of hearts. Have enough food and you can basically get yourself from 1 heart to 10 in under a second. This is actually kind of similar to Insta-Soup PvP, which I'll talk about later. Aside from items, movement worked differently. There was no sprinting and no critical hits, meaning that fights were really slow slugfests. Knockback was also very limited, actually barely noticeable due to lack of sprinting, which meant that the amount of skill involved in these fights were minimal. Finally, back in this version of the game, armor worked differently. All armor gave the same degree of damage reduction, being 80%. The difference between rare armor such as diamond and easier to obtain armor such as leather was simply durability. Since all armor protected you the same, the only benefit of diamond armor was that it had higher durability, lasting longer. Fights in alpha versions of the game, and largely in beta as well, were simply about aim. Nothing else really. However, moving into beta 1.8 now, and PvP would begin to change. Beta 1.8 introduced sprinting, blocking, and criticals, and also included a food bar to regenerate health, while also changing some previously broken mechanics. But before we get into that, consider subscribing. No pressure though. Anyways, sprinting without jumping allowed players to move at 5.612 meters a second, 30% faster than the 4.317 meters per second you move while walking. Sprinting also allowed players to do more knockback on the first hit during the sprint. This version also added the ability to do critical hits when attacking while falling in midair, allowing you to do up to 50% more damage. But it was random, meaning that with a diamond sword, you could either do a whopping 7.5 hearts of damage with a critical hit, or the critical could do nothing at all, and all you would do is a standard 5 hearts. Blocking also allowed you to reduce the amount of damage you would take by 50%, at the cost of some movement speed. In beta 1.8, blocking was actually really strong because it could be used to negate fall damage, meaning players could fall from 42 blocks without dying instead of 22. And for some reason, blocking underwater allowed you to rise to the surface faster. These were both changed in the next version, however. In addition, bows were changed drastically, finally having the drawback animation, preventing players from using it like a machine gun. This meant that in order to shoot further and do more damage, you would have to spend time to draw back the bow, balancing the weapon properly. Finally, Beta 1.8 also saw the addition of a hunger bar, changing how health naturally regenerated. The more you sprinted and jumped, the more hunger you would lose, and in order to be able to naturally regenerate health, your hunger bar had to be 90% or more full, so only one drumstick could be missing. This was most likely added to balance sprinting. However, the changes did not stop there. One version later, 1.0.0, Minecraft's full release, introduced enchantments and potions, forever changing the PvP meta. In this update, enchantments such as fire aspect, sharpness, knockback, and protection were added, giving players who had them advantages in PvP. The diamond sword's damage was decreased to 7 or 3.5 hearts to balance new enchantments such as sharpness. Each level of sharpness on a sword did an extra 1.25 damage, which at the max level of 5 meant that a diamond sword could do 13.25 damage, or roughly 6.5 hearts. Add fire aspect, which does 1.5 hearts of damage at level 1 and 3.5 hearts at level 2, and you can one-shot somebody who is unarmed without even doing a critical. The knockback enchantment at level 1, while despised on most faction servers at the time, would do an additional 3 blocks to base knockback and would add an additional 6 at level 2. Factor in this base knockback of 2 to 4 blocks and you could potentially send somebody 10 blocks back with one well-timed hit. Similar enchantments for the bow, such as power, flame, and punch were also added, functioning very similar to sharpness, fire aspect, and knockback. 1.0.0 also added multiple armor enchantments, and notably for PvP there was protection 1 through to 4. Unlike the other types of protection such as fire protection, which specialized in protection from lava and fire, protection provided general damage reductions from almost all damage sources in the game. This meant it was the best for protection from melee weapons and the second best for protection from bows. Diamond armor by itself in this version reduced 80% of damage. Protection 4 added 6.4% damage reduction on average, meaning that full diamond armor with protection 4 could reduce on average 92% of damage. Potions such as strength could increase melee damage by 260%, and potions such as swiftness 2 could increase speed by 40%. These potions would provide players with specific advantages in PvP, and if used right, were incredibly strong. Those were the main changes in version 1.0.0, and after this, PvP largely stayed the same up until version 1.9, which we'll talk about later. There were the addition of god apples or notch apples, which were the much more powerful variant of standard golden apples, but that was about it. So let's now talk about how some servers pioneered certain styles of Minecraft PvP, and changed it forever. First of all, faction servers. Minecraft Factions dates back as early as 2010. However, back then the plugin only had the basics which we know today, such as F-Claim, F-Home, and a few others. Nothing too special. Back then, people would build bases above ground, and it was common to see castles or villages, rather than crazy big boxes with hundreds of obsidian walls like we have today. TNT was hard to come by, but it didn't matter because TNT cannons were only simple back then. This meant that PvP was encouraged, as instead of raiding a base by blowing away inside, people raided by killing the enemy faction enough and overclaiming their land. In 2010 and 2011, faction servers didn't really give players any rare gear to start with, so most fights were just in iron armor and diamond swords, or in the rare occurrences, diamond armor and diamond swords. It was also rare to have kits and pay to win donor ranks, so once players died, they probably didn't have too much backup. Around 2012 was when things began to change. Most servers started implementing plugins which allowed players to obtain items which would normally be unobtainable in vanilla Minecraft, such as monster spawners and XP bottles. It was at this time that getting enchanted diamond armor also became much easier, and players began building bases underground, as well as sky bases way up in the sky at the build limit. This is when we enter the enchanted golden apple, or mushroom soup PvP era, featuring enchanted weapons and armor. This would continue into 2013, but as 2014 came around, mushroom soups were largely phased out, being replaced by instant health potions. This was further popularized when game modes such as Arena and hardcore factions would also use instant health potions as their primary way of keeping health high. Golden apples, which were previously rare or hard to come by, became much more common, turning PvP battles into longer drawn out fights where the first to run out of healing or have their armor break would lose. Then, during 2015 and 2016, custom enchanted armor became a thing, and servers began allowing players access to hundreds of god apples, potions, and you name it. PvP lost its fast-paced side, as fights would frequently draw out over 15 minutes long, and the only way to win was to basically break your opponent's armor or eat less god apples than them. It became less about who could get more hits before the other person could, and more about who actually cares enough to click your mouse multiple times to get a virtue set of armor, which is basically valueless as it can be easily replaced with a single command. PvP became rather unenjoyable, as it would take so long that you would often lose interest. But hold it, we need to go back a few years. While PvP on faction servers is terrible these days, back in 2012 and 2013, PvP also began developing on other servers such as MCPvP, which is now shut down, who was one of the first to include soups into their PvP game modes. Alongside MCPvP, the rise in popularity of minigames which were centered around PvP such as Hunger Games made PvP increasingly more popular. One server notorious for incorporating high-skill PvP and challenging team-based game modes or minigames was the Overcast Network. The Overcast Network ran a variety of game modes which forced players to work together as a team and accomplish certain goals, ranging from killing the enemy team a certain amount of times to capturing the wall or other monuments and objectives. The great thing about this server was the flawless way they incorporated PvP into their game modes, not relying on any other gimmicks or kits to make it interesting like in many modern-day minigames. All players started with the same gear and limited healing, but could acquire better gear through gathering resources or killing others. This meant that players could be very flexible with their fighting strategies, and players who knew their PvP skills weren't as good as others could stick with a few other players in combat or get better gear before fighting, even utilizing more ranged combat with the bow. This meant that while the server remained very competitive with highly skilled players, it also allowed low skilled beginners to join in and have just as much fun, which most competitive game modes such as UHC struggled with. While the original Overcast network has shut down now, many similar servers with smaller communities are still around and thriving today. In my opinion, the Overcast network really displayed what peak Minecraft PvP looked like, being skill-based, but still inclusive for everybody. One other server which really pioneered the more modern genre of Minecraft PvP was Badline. Originally founded in 2013, the server began as a small kit PvP server for the Overcast network and hardcore faction clan called Badline, owned by Archibot. The server was initially used to practice PvP, but soon other clans also began playing and a plugin developer called Master G-Berry was brought in. Together they developed and pioneered the practice or arena duel game mode we see today, which featured popular duel types such as debuff and no debuff as well as build UHC. This really pushed the instant health potion archetype that we previously discussed. Badline would also be the first server to incorporate a ranking system, which would match players by skill, and as of today, it was probably the most popular competitive Minecraft server ever. They even almost pioneered Minecraft esports, but more about that in another video. Tragically, the server shut down in late 2018 due to disinterest. Anyways, if isn't clear, Badline really pioneered the competitive side of Minecraft, and its impact is still seen on servers such as minemen.club and lunar.gg today. These servers help develop players' methods of PvP, such as sprint cancelling, where you hit somebody, stop sprinting, and then start sprinting again, resetting your sprint allowing you to do more knockback, as on your first attack while sprinting, your knockback is greater, as we discussed in the beta 1.8 update. Used in conjunction with strafing, you can get players into combos which are very difficult to break without turning and running. The competitiveness of these servers pushed the player base to improve and discover methods of PvPing which many people just didn't know at the time. For example, jitter clicking and butterfly clicking became very popular once players realized their power, normally after being beat by somebody using it. So you might have noticed a common trend in some of these old PvP Minecraft servers I talked about. They all shut down. And this is where we move into Minecraft PvP's final stage of its evolution, 1.9. On February the 26th, 2016, Minecraft version 1.9 was released, forever changing Minecraft PvP. 1.9 updated axes, making them a weapon of choice in PvP, adding shields, a hit delay, and changing the fundamentals of PvP which everybody had learned. The hit delay meant that players could no longer click fast when PvPing, having to wait 0.625 seconds when attacking with a sword, otherwise they'll do next to no damage. While this doesn't sound like much, if you compare 1.8 and 1.9 PvP side by side, the differences are very notable. The addition of shields, which if used correctly could completely negate all damage from other players, meant that you could no longer get players into combos. Instead, the PvP meta switched to axes, which now did more damage than swords at the cost of a bigger hit delay. 1.9 PvP is all about getting those big critical hits. With an unenchanted diamond axe, you deal 4.5 hearts of damage to unarmored players, but jumping and doing a critical hit does 6.5 hearts of damage, significantly more. This means in 1.9 PvP, due to attack cooldowns, every hit matters, and as such, you want to ensure you land every single hit, making sure it's a critical so they deal more damage. Ensuring you land all your hits is especially important due to the slow axe reset time of 1 second as I just mentioned, basically meaning you can only attack once per second, significantly less than the upwards of 15 clicks per second 1.8 PvPers are used to. The other reason axes are the weapon of choice in 1.9 PvP is due to a feature which gives you a 75% chance to disable shields for 5 seconds upon attack as long as you are sprinting, allowing you to get free hits in. This means swords are largely underutilized as they don't do as much damage and are unable to disable shields. As we move into more modern versions of the game, PvP has largely remained unchanged. New weapons such as tridents and crossbows were added, and some PvP mechanics were altered slightly, but nothing major. However, while we have had 1.9 PvP for 4 years now, most popular servers centered around PvP still remain on 1.8, or at least have plugins which change the PvP back to 1.8. In fact, there are so few minigame or PvP servers which run 1.9 PvP that when Technoblade was trained to fight Dream, players figured out what his old account was, as there was really only one server he good practice 1.9 PvP on. So if it isn't clear already, the community is incredibly divided about the change, with many refusing to update or play on versions past 1.8.9. But things may be changing for the better in the near future. If you follow Minecraft relatively closely, then you may have heard of the combat snapshots, which are separate snapshot versions of Minecraft that Mojang are using to test their new PvP changes. Now, it's unknown when these are going to be implemented into the main game, but many updates have been made to the combat snapshot over the past year, so things are looking really promising. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but basically the attack cooldown has largely been removed, and you can click really fast again. The axe still does more damage than the sword, but it was also not as fast. They also nerfed axes by giving them less reach than a sword. However, one thing they have added, which I really dislike, is a super fast auto clicker. Right now, I'm only holding down left click, and look how fast it goes. Other changes include the fact that axes always disable shields now, meaning they can be used strategically with swords to first disable the shield, then switch to a sword to rain down attacks upon the opponent. They also made shields much weaker in this version, making them only block up to 2.5 hearts of damage, and only block 50% of knockback instead of all of it. Now, there are a lot more changes, so if you're interested, you can go to the wiki or Reddit to read and try the snapshot for yourself. But anyways, Minecraft PvP has evolved so much throughout the years, and many of these decisions have divided the community. Who knows what the future holds with combat snapshots, but at least Mojang is making an effort to change the things which players dislike. Maybe one day the PvP community will finally be content with newer versions of the game, but only time will tell. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you did. Also join the Discord. Thank you all so much for watching.